Every single August, without fail, one man logs onto social media and says something that makes half the internet furious, and the other half spit out their coffee laughing. He's not a politician. He's not a comedian by trade. He's a farmer who used to drive fast cars for a living. And somehow, his one tweet a year has become more anticipated than most celebrity announcements. This year, he did it again. And to understand why it worked, again, we need to go back and look at the man behind it. Jeremy Clarkson isn't just a car guy. That's the easy label. But it barely scratches the surface of a career that spanned nearly 4 decades, 3 broadcasters, multiple controversies, and, somewhat unexpectedly, a second act as one of Britain's most watched farmers. He started out in the late 1980s as a motoring journalist, eventually landing a presenting role on a little BBC show called Top Gear. Back then, Top Gear was a fairly ordinary car review program. Clarkson, alongside producer Andy Willman, didn't just present it. He rebuilt it from the ground up in the 2000s into something closer to entertainment television than automotive journalism. Explosions, races across continents, absurd challenges, and a level of sarcasm that either delighted or enraged viewers depending on who you asked. It became one of the most watched factual television programs on the planet. Alongside him were 2 co-hosts who would become just as central to his story, Richard Hammond and James May. Together, the 3 of them formed a chemistry that television executives spend careers trying to manufacture and rarely succeed. It wasn't scripted charm. It was 3 genuinely different personalities who seemed to actually enjoy needling each other on camera. That chemistry survived a very public fallout with the BBC in 2015 when Clarkson was dropped from Top Gear following a physical altercation with a producer. Instead of ending the trio's run, it simply relocated it. Amazon scooped up all 3 for a reported enormous deal, and the Grand Tour was born. A show that essentially did what Top Gear did, just with a bigger budget and fewer restrictions. The Grand Tour ran until 2024, closing out with a final special filmed in Zimbabwe. But by then, Clarkson had already started building what would become the most surprising chapter of his career. In 2019, Clarkson took over the farming operations on his own land in the Cotswolds, a roughly 1,000-acre estate, after his previous tenant farmer retired. What started as what many assumed would be a vanity project or a one-off television stunt turned into Clarkson's Farm, a documentary series following his very real, very messy attempts to actually run a working farm. The show worked because it wasn't staged competence. Clarkson was, and by his own admission, still is, bad at farming in the traditional sense. He makes expensive mistakes. He fights with local council planning permission. He argues with his long-suffering land agent, Charlie Ireland, and his farmhand, Kaleb Cooper, who became something of a breakout star in his own right. Audiences didn't tune in to watch an expert. They tuned in to watch someone genuinely struggle with weather, bureaucracy, and the brutal economics of modern agriculture, and somehow keep going anyway. It resonated far beyond car enthusiasts. Farmers themselves began citing the show as one of the few pieces of mainstream media that accurately captured how difficult and thankless commercial farming has become in the UK. Clarkson has used his platform repeatedly to lobby on behalf of British farmers. Inheritance tax changes, supermarket pricing pressure on producers, and increasingly, the impact of extreme weather on harvests. Which brings us to right now. This past week, Clarkson posted something far less jokey than usual, sharing a weather forecast showing temperatures climbing toward 29 degrees Celsius over his farm in Chipping Norton. He didn't hold back on how bad the timing was. In his words, the harvest was already compromised, and there wasn't much left to do except accept it and move on. It's a small moment, but it says a lot about how Clarkson's public persona has shifted over the years. The man who once dismissed concerns about extreme heat with biting sarcasm back in 2022, a comment he later admitted in a Guardian interview was exaggerated for television effect, is now the same man publicly documenting in real time how unpredictable weather patterns are directly costing him money and crops. That's not a small pivot. For years, critics accused Clarkson of playing a caricature, deliberately provocative, deliberately dismissive of anything resembling environmental concern, because outrage generated ratings. But 4 seasons into actually running a farm, watching heat waves scorch his fields and floods drown his cover crops in the same calendar year, his tone has noticeably changed. He's not lecturing anyone about climate policy. He's just describing what farming actually looks like right now, on his own land, with his own money on the line. Fans in the comments responded the way they usually do when Clarkson posts about the farm rather than his usual political jabs, with genuine sympathy, and a fair number of people expressing hope for rain, not just for him, but for farmers across the country dealing with the same conditions. This is worth sitting with for a second, because it's the through line of his entire second career. Clarkson's farm works not because it glamorizes agriculture, but because it makes the hardship visible to an audience who would otherwise never think about where their food comes from. Then there's the other side of Clarkson, the one that shows up every August like clockwork. For over a decade now, on UK A-level results day, the day hundreds of thousands of 18-year-olds find out whether they got into university, Clarkson has posted some version of the same message. This year's version followed the pattern. A reminder that he personally got mediocre grades, followed by a description of him relaxing in his garden that evening, drinking beer from his own brewery, and eating food from his own farm, prepared by his own chef. It's a joke, obviously, but it's also, in a strange way, one of the most effective pieces of personal branding in modern British media. Think about what that single tweet accomplishes. It reassures anxious teenagers that bad exam results don't define your future. A genuinely kind message, wrapped in self-deprecation. At the same time, it subtly reminds everyone exactly how far Clarkson has come. From a C and 2 us, to owning a brewery, a farm,